Order. Today we are considering 5 nominations. Erik Hooks to be the Deputy Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Michael Kubayanda to serve a second term as a Commissioner on the Postal Regulatory Commission. Laurel Blatchford to be the Controller of the Office of Federal Financial Management within the Office of Management and Budget. And Ebony Scott and Donald Tunanja, who are both joining us remotely to be Associate Judges on the Superior Court for the District of Columbia. Welcome to each of you and to your friends and family members joining us here today. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for all of your previous service and for your willingness to take on these very important new roles. These are all very different positions, but each is critically important to the federal government and to our nation's capital. I'm pleased that we're considering highly qualified nominees for each of these roles, and in particular for several roles that have been vacant for far too long. FEMA has been without a Senate-confirmed Deputy Administrator for nearly 2 years, and OMB has not had a Senate-confirmed Controller in almost 5 years. Additionally, the D.C. Superior Court is struggling with high vacancy levels. There are currently 14 associate judge vacancies on the court, and I'm glad we have 2 nominees to the Superior Court here today and hope to see several other seats filled shortly. Thank you again for your willingness to serve and for being with us today. I look forward to hearing from each of our nominees. I'll recognize Ranking Member Portman for his opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to commend the nominees for stepping up to serve the public, both in the federal government and the D.C. government. Mr. Hooks, you come to us with more than 30 years of public service. I've seen law enforcement, public safety in North Carolina. I think your firsthand experience working with FEMA, which is the leading emergency management federal level, but also doing that at the state level, is critical background for someone tapped to help lead the agency. Yeah, I'm sure you saw that in the latest legislation, the infrastructure legislation, there's a $1 billion funding for the BRIC program, which is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. I think this is a good program, and I think it'll make your job a lot different, and ultimately will help the taxpayer and certainly citizens who live in areas that are prone to natural disasters, because it lets you mitigate disasters before they strike. And confirms my hope that you will use your state experience to ensure that BRIC is used in a strategic way for exactly those purposes, to target those regions with the highest vulnerabilities to disasters. Commissioner Kubayanda, the Postal Regulatory Commission is a small but mighty group, I think 75 people, but plays a very important role in promoting transparency and accountability in our postal system. We rely on it, including examining the Postal Service's financial data, monitoring its service performance, and ensuring they follow the law when setting prices. Over the past 2 years, as you know, the importance of the Postal Service to our nation's supply chain has stood out, and the Postal Service faces obviously a difficult situation as first-class mail, which has traditionally sustained the institution, has continued to decline, and so it's a time of change. I know this is your second nomination to the Postal Regulatory Commission. You've already served as a commissioner for nearly 3 years and chairman since January 1st. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the nation's postal system, as well as its challenges and what you are looking forward to for the future. Ms. Blatchford, I enjoyed our conversation over the telephone. As you know, I think this is an incredibly important position, the Comptroller in the Office of Federal Management, OMB. I think it's one of the most important positions in the federal government as the federal government addresses the significant economic and other issues that face our country. As a former OMB director, I was very reliant on the person in this position, and understand it's important to our federal government's proper functioning. It's so important that Congress actually placed specific qualifications on the position, and this is established in the U.S. Code under 31 U.S.C. Section 504. The Comptroller is required to possess a demonstrated ability and practical experience in accounting, financial management, and financial systems, and extensive practical experience in financial management in large governmental or business entities." End quote. I look forward to discussing how you meet these requirements for the position of controller. And if you are confirmed, I look forward to working with you on improving transparency in the federal government and better access for all taxpayers to the accountability that comes from more information. And to Judge Scott and Mr. Tunaj, thank you for being here as the committee considers your nominations as associate judges on the D.C. Superior Court. Both of you have spent essentially your entire career in public service, as I see, and I appreciate your willingness to serve as judges on the D.C. Court. Congress has a unique relationship with the D.C. justice system, as outlined in the House in the Home Rule Act. As you know, there are important issues facing D.C., including rising crime that all of us are aware of. There have been significantly more homicides, assaults, and armed robberies this year than there were at the same time last year, as an example. It's one reason we need impartial and qualified judges on the D.C. Superior Court to ensure timely justice for all parties. I look forward to discussing this and other issues with Judge Scott and Mr. Tunaj. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. It's the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if each of our witnesses will stand, including our witnesses that are joining us via Zoom, would rise and raise your right hands. Do you swear that the testimony that you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Our first nominee is Erik Hooks, nominated to be Deputy Administrator of FEMA. Mr. Hooks has more than 30 years of public safety experience, including serving as Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security Advisor for the state of North Carolina. As Secretary, Mr. Hooks led North Carolina's largest department, which includes the state's Emergency Management Agency, Office of Recovery and Resilience, the North Carolina National Guard, and several law enforcement agencies. Prior to his tenure as Secretary, Mr. Hooks served for 28 years in North Carolina's State Bureau of Investigation, where he held several leadership roles, including Assistant Director of the Professional Standards Division and Head of the Threat Assessment and State Asset Investigations Unit. Welcome, Mr. Hooks. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Erik A. Hooks, and it is a privilege to appear before you today as the President's nominee to the position of Deputy Administrator for FEMA. I'm honored to have been nominated by President Biden for this important emergency management leadership role. I'm humbled by the opportunity to appear before this committee, and thank you for considering my nomination. If confirmed, I look forward to working with Secretary Mayorkas, Administrator Criswell, and the entire team at FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security on building a more resilient and prepared nation. I would like to thank my wife of almost 30 years, Muriel, and our son, Brandon, who have sacrificed along with me in my deep commitment to public service and a career in public safety. I would also like to acknowledge the committed men and women of FEMA, our military, federal, state, and local emergency management and public safety partners who work tirelessly to protect and lead recovery efforts from multiple hazards across our great nation. If confirmed, it will be my sincere privilege to again work alongside these resolute public safety professionals. I spent over 30 years serving the state of North Carolina, first as a special agent and as a senior leader of the State Bureau of Investigation for over 27 years. Then in January 2017, the governor of North Carolina appointed me to serve as the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security Advisor for North Carolina. Over the last 4 years in that role, I led North Carolina's disaster mitigation, response, and recovery efforts as the state navigated an increasing number of natural disasters. I had the privilege to lead approximately 27,000 sworn and civilian public safety professionals, as well as approximately 12,000 National Guard soldiers and airmen. I provided cabinet-level leadership to the North Carolina Division of Emergency Management and its Homeland Security Section, the North Carolina National Guard, the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience, the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, the North Carolina Alcohol Law Enforcement Division, the North Carolina State Capitol Police, the Division of Adult Correction and Juvenile Justice, the Governor's Crime Commission, and support divisions within the Department of Public Safety. I was ultimately responsible for leadership coordination of Homeland Security and emergency management functions to provide comprehensive and coordinated preparedness, mitigation, prevention, protection, response, and recovery for emergencies, disasters, and acts or threats of terrorism. As the leader of North Carolina State Administrative Agency for Homeland Security Grant Funds, I administered federal funds to state, local, tribal entities across North Carolina. I also chaired the North Carolina State Emergency Response Commission, and through a talented team of professionals, coordinated law enforcement counterterrorism prevention, preparedness and response training on a statewide basis, resulting in a cohesive team response by both law enforcement and emergency first responders to acts of terrorism or a terrorist threat. I recently served on the Executive Committee of the National Governor's Homeland Security Advisors Council, and I'm a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Today, we face a multitude of challenges which must be successfully navigated through a proactive and collaborative effort to ensure FEMA can deliver needed critical services to the nation. During my tenure as the North Carolina Secretary of Public Safety, we responded to numerous disasters, including a number of state-declared disasters as well as presidentially declared disasters. My public service experience prepares me for the position of FEMA Deputy Administrator. I believe for us to create and maintain a true culture of prevention, protection, and preparedness, we must work collaboratively across all levels of government and segments of society to ready our nation for the many hazards we face and to ensure our nation's resiliency from catastrophic events is at its highest level possible. If confirmed, it would be my honor to serve our nation by helping all communities reduce the risks associated with future disasters while assisting disaster survivors across the country. I am committed to work tirelessly and with a deep sense of purpose to ready the nation for catastrophic disasters, build a culture of preparedness, and reduce the complexity of FEMA. With your consent, I would be honored to serve the American people. Thank you for your time and attention concerning my nomination, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hooks, for your opening comments. Our next nominee is Michael Kubayanda, who is nominated to serve a second term as a commissioner on the Postal Regulatory Commission. Mr. Kubayanda has served on the commission since January of 2019 after being unanimously confirmed by the Senate. He served as the commission's vice chairman from August 2019 through the end of 2020 and has served as chairman since January of 2021. Prior to joining the commission, Mr. Kubayanda served as a board member and privacy officer for the digital health startup. Before that, he held multiple roles with the U.S. Postal Service Office of Inspector General, including overseeing research on technical issues and postal economics and serving as director of government relations. Welcome, Mr. Kubayanda. You may proceed with your opening comments.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify regarding my nomination to the Postal Regulatory Commission. I've been honored to serve as a commissioner since January 2019 and as chairman since January 2021, a period in which the postal system has undergone significant changes. The Postal Service has served its mission of binding the nation together during the pandemic. Postal workers kept Americans connected, allowed businesses to reach customers, enabled citizens to safely receive supplies, and helped carry out elections. On the other hand, customers reported woeful performance in some areas, and the quantitative evidence confirmed this. During this difficult period, the Commission has carried out its mission of providing transparency and accountability. The Commission produced 2 annual compliance determinations on time during the pandemic, overseeing service and financial compliance. We have also issued major rulemakings on a bipartisan basis, including the 10-year review of the rate-making system and updates to our rules on accounting and cost allocation. In addition, we have increased the Commission's focus on customer experience by probing the Postal Service performance against CX metrics, including those adopted from the private sector. Over the years, the Commission has mastered the annual compliance cycle established under 1970 and 2006 legislation. While these tools are proven, they may not be entirely adequate for our present situation and the speed of commerce today. For example, the high-profile service problems in the 2020 holiday season occurred in fiscal year 2021. They will be addressed in the 2021 annual compliance determination, but that won't be out until March 2022. So that is 15 to 16 months after the problems originally occurred. The Commission is capable of providing transparency through more relevant and timely analyses. Working with my colleagues, I am doing everything in my power and within the Commission's authority to make sure we provide them. Our traditional tools for providing accountability and transparency must be updated with a data-centric, customer-centric, and citizen-centric approach. This modernization is guided by bipartisan legislation approved by this committee and the needs of the moment. It is also modeled on the success of other parts of the government, such as the Postal Service Office of Inspector General. The Commission is currently implementing the Open Government Data Act. Pursuant to this law, the Commission will soon hire its first Chief Data Officer and establish a Data Governance Board to make data available to the public in machine-readable formats and manage data as a strategic asset to the nation. The Commission is also reorganizing its staff to launch a small data analytics group to examine the postal network, address bottlenecks, and conduct specialized studies of postal costs. This team will build on our prior work identifying pinch points in the postal network through the Commission. Pending internal approvals, the Commission is also working on new data visualization approaches, such as a beta version of a service performance dashboard on our website. Dashboards can provide more understandable and timely insights into service performance and eventually into financial performance as well. The proposed beta dashboard is the result of work performed in-house by our enterprising staff with no additional investment. These are modest steps on a small scale, but they are necessary in modernizing postal regulation. To support this approach, the Commission has expanded its technological capabilities. We have hired IT and cybersecurity experts and are moving to cloud computing to support security and long-term cost savings. The Commission has also applied to the Technology Modernization Fund to bolster these efforts. Strategic use of data and technology can update the Commission's traditional mission of transparency and accountability. It allows the Commission to benefit from better informed inputs from a broad range of stakeholders and provides discipline and focus for the exercise of our core responsibilities. Through this data-centric, customer-centric, and citizen-centric approach, I hope the Commission can contribute to a virtuous cycle, continue to make this corner of government more responsive, and adapt postal regulation to improve services to American citizens and businesses. I hope to return to the Commission to help it execute on this approach. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Commissioner Kubayanda, thank you for your opening remarks. Our next nominee is Laurel Blatchford, nominated to be Controller of the Office of Federal Financial Management within the Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Blatchford has over 20 years of nonprofit and government leadership experience, including serving as the Chief of Staff of the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Executive Director of the Hurricane Sandy Task Force, where she guided the implementation of disaster resilience funding across New York and New Jersey. She is currently a managing director at Blue Meridian Partners, a nonprofit and philanthropic organization that invests in economic and social mobility nationwide. Prior to joining Blue Meridian, she served as president of Enterprise Community Partners, a national nonprofit focused on affordable housing and community development. Welcome, Ms. Blatchford. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today as President Biden's nominee for Controller, Office of Federal Financial Management, and the Office of Management and Budget. I'm deeply humbled to have been nominated for this important role and would be honored to have the chance to serve the American people if confirmed. I want to thank my husband of 21 years, Bernie Kluger, and our 2 children for their love and support. And I know he and they are watching alongside many friends, family members, and colleagues. Thank you all for your love and support. I sit before you today because I am at heart a public servant. This calling comes directly from my parents. My father, Edward Blatchford, was an accomplished teacher and school administrator whose leadership and vision impacted the lives of many kids and their families. My mother, Claire, is also an educator and community leader who has shared the challenges and blessings of her own lived experience as a deaf woman to help others in countless ways. Their lives of purpose and service have had incredible impact on those around them, and I'm deeply grateful for their example. I started my own public service career as a young paralegal in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office investigating organized crime. Since then, my path has taken me from working on a wide range of projects in the New York City Mayor's Office for Mayor Michael Bloomberg to a leadership role in the largest affordable housing and community development agency locally in the country, to then serving as Chief of Staff at the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, and then as Executive Director of the Hurricane Sandy Task Force, to continued service in the nonprofit world where I served as President of Enterprise Community Partners. Along the way, I've had the honor of working on a wide range of issues, including 9/11 recovery, our ongoing housing crisis, the many management challenges facing HUD, and recovery from natural disasters, including Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, and more recent storms and wildfires. Across these different roles, one clear lesson has shown through. No matter how brilliant the idea or how much money we've been able to invest, the success of every project I've ever been involved with is dependent on how the work is done. I have seen time and time again that strong implementation with transparency, with efficiency, with consistency, and with strong partnerships is essential to success, especially in the public sector. Great ideas without great execution are not enough. If confirmed as controller, I would bring my track record of delivering results to the unique and unprecedented challenges and opportunities we are facing right now as a country. Just as I have done before, I'm eager to serve and bring my energies and capabilities to ensuring that the federal government works more effectively and efficiently for the American people, and specifically that our considerable financial resources and investments are being deployed, tracked, and spent as well as possible. I would be especially excited to serve alongside the talented and hardworking career and political staff at the Office of Management and Budget, some of whom I had the privilege of working with and knowing during my prior federal service. If confirmed, I would be honored to join this team, to lead OFFM, and to work closely with leaders across the federal family and with Congress to ensure that we accomplish our shared goals. Thank you for the chance to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. Next, we will have a video from Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton to introduce our final 2 nominees, Ebony Scott and Donald Tunaj, who are both nominated to be Associate Judges on the Superior Court for the District of Columbia.
Chairman Peters and Ranking Member Portman, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce Ebony Scott and Donald Tunaj to be Associate Judges on the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Both bring the experience and credentials to be excellent judges. Ms. Scott currently serves as a magistrate judge on the D.C. Superior Court, having been appointed in January 2020. Prior to being a magistrate judge, Ms. Scott served as the Deputy Director of the D.C. Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel. In that position, she provided legal advice to the mayor and to D.C. agencies. Prior to that work, Ms. Scott was a general counsel of the D.C. Office of Human Rights, where she oversaw the day-to-day operations of the legal division. Ms. Scott has also served as Assistant Attorney General and Acting Section Chief in the Office of the D.C. Attorney General's Housing and Community Justice Section. Prior to her public service work, Ms. Scott worked in private practice for almost 5 years as a civil litigator and served as a law clerk for the D.C. Court of Appeals. She has also served as an adjunct professor of law at the American University College of Law. Ms. Scott is a graduate of the American University Washington College of Law and the University of Rochester. I'm also pleased to introduce Donald Tunich to be an associate judge on the D.C. Superior Court. Mr. Tunich is a career attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. In this position, Mr. Tunich has spent 2 decades enforcing such important civil rights laws as the Fair Housing Act and the Civil Rights Act. Mr. Tunich has received Special Achievement Awards and is a 3-time recipient of Special Commendation for outstanding performance. During his time with the Department of Justice, Mr. Tunich was an assistant state public defender, not during his time, but before his time with the Department of Justice. Mr. Tunich was an assistant state public defender in Florida, litigating criminal appeals on behalf of indigent individuals. A magna cum laude graduate of Morehouse College and a graduate of Duke University Law School, Mr. Tunich also holds a Master in Public Policy from Harvard Kennedy School of Government. I appreciate the committee moving these nominees, and I look forward to working with you to end the vacancy crisis.
Well, welcome, Judge Scott and Mr. Tunich. Judge Scott, you may proceed with your opening remarks. I think you're on mute right now, Judge. The judge is still on mute. Mr. Tunich, we'll go to you. Judge Scott, we understand it's the recording studios having the issue, not you. We'll see if, Mr. Tunich, let's hope your sound is working if you want to proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good morning. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am deeply grateful to you and your dedicated committee staffers for considering my nomination. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the entire Judicial Nomination Commission, and specifically its chair, the Honorable Emmett G. Sullivan, for recommending me. And I thank President Joseph Biden for nominating me to be an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I extend also my gratitude and appreciation to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton for her very kind introduction. I'm most appreciative of her support. This nomination and the opportunity to appear before you today are easily the highest honors of my professional career. I sit before you today buttressed by the support of my extended family, classmates, close friends, and colleagues. Through unwavering support, they have mentored, supported, and encouraged me in life and throughout my career. I offer special mention to my husband, Juan Ruiz Rojas, whose commitment and dedication form the fulcrum that allows me to successfully balance work, family, and co-parenting our 4-year-old son, Alec. Guiding and being a loving and caring parent and papa to Alec is the eternal commitment of my life. My mother, Linda Walker, a formerly retired public school educator who returned to her career in education because it's more accurately her life's calling, is watching with great enthusiasm and unbridled love and support from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I also would like to offer special recognition to my late father, a veteran of the United States Army and a retired public school educator who was known affectionately as Don. I am my father's namesake, and his unconditional and unswerving support uplifted and motivated me during his lifetime, while the memory of his unconditional love has been a personal and private comfort since his passing. The entirety of my professional career has been in pursuit of fair process and equal treatment. Since 2000, I have had the honor and privilege as serving as a career trial attorney in the United States Department of Justice, where I have represented the United States in enforcing statutes that ensure full and fair participation of all citizens in life's material activities such as housing, employment, and the constitutional right to be secure in their persons and effects. During my 2 decades career as a Justice Department trial attorney, I have appeared in federal district courts in more than 10 states, and I have dutifully executed and served under 5 different presidential administrations. Prior to joining the Department of Justice, I served as an assistant public defender, where my advocacy was for trial proceedings that were fair and constitutionally compliant. In my professional experience, I practiced as defense counsel, civil litigator, criminal prosecutor. I've appeared in state appellate courts and federal district courts. In each role and in every appearance, I have advocated for equality under law and procedural fairness. If I am granted the honor of confirmation, those will be my guideposts as I seek to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice. In closing, I'd like to restate my sincere gratitude, Mr. Chairman, to you and every member of the committee for considering my nomination, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have of me.
Thank you, Mr. Tunaush, for your comments. Judge Scott, you're recognized for your opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Peters. Are you able to hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. I'm used to these technical glitches at this point. Thank you again. Good morning to you, Chairman, and to Ranking Member Portman. And thank you for holding this hearing today, as well as the committee staff. Thank you to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton for her kind remarks. They are sincerely appreciated. I would like to thank the Judicial Nomination Commission and its chair, the Honorable Emmett Sullivan, for recommending me to the White House. And I would like to especially thank President Joseph Biden for this tremendous honor of his nomination. As Maya Angelou has said, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. I did not travel the road that led me here today alone. I would like to thank and acknowledge my court family, in particular, the Chief of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, Chief Judge Anita Josie Herring, and my mentor, Chief Judge Anna Blackburn Rigsby of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, for their immeasurable support. I am truly fortunate to have the support not only of my colleagues present and past, but of my friends and family members, too many to name, many of whom are watching virtually, and all of whom I am deeply grateful to. I would like to recognize my husband and thank my husband, my soulmate, in fact, John Scott. His love has been enduring, and his encouragement and understanding has been absolutely endless. I would like to recognize my maternal grandmother, Gladys Slaughter, and my grandfather, who I affectionately refer to as Grandpapa. They are both watching from my hometown of Buffalo, New York. Thank you for your support and, most importantly, your love. I would like to recognize my father-in-law, John Henry Scott, and my mother-in-law, Jo Ellen Scott, who, along with many others I suspect, are watching from my second home in Greenville, South Carolina. I would also like to recognize my husband's mother, Dorothy Harris Scott, who passed away in 1996. Although I never had the pleasure or the honor of meeting my husband's mother, her spirit is with me and I honor her memory today. I would now like to tell you a little bit about my background. My mother, Darnetta Adamson, who was watching from home, is quite frankly my hero. My mother had me as a teenager, and even though she had many hurdles to cross as a result of being a teenage mother, she always modeled for me grace, hard work, humility, and strength. As I have told my mother many times over the years, the pride that wells up in her when she looks at me is the same pride that wells up in me when I look at her. Thank you, Mom. My father, DeWitt Oliver, who we lost at a very young age to COVID, at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, was also a source of strength for me and a man of dignity and valor, having served our country as a Marine. Likewise, my maternal grandmother, Elizabeth Morse, who we lost just a few months after my father, was also a source of strength and encouragement. My grandmother instilled in me the pursuit of excellence, which I have carried with me every step of my career, including in my current role as a magistrate judge on the Superior Court. Since my appointment to the bench as a magistrate judge, I have presided over the court's high-volume civil calendars, dutifully applying the law to the facts and serving the court, most importantly, with respect. Prior to my service on the court, I was a civil trial attorney and assistant attorney general for the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia, and I brought a variety of matters in the Superior Court over the course of 9 years. I also served as a journalist and worked on administrative and personnel matters affecting local and government employees and district agencies. I began my career as a judicial law clerk to the Honorable Chief Judge Anna Blackburn Rigsby on the DC Court of Appeals, and I regularly regard that clerkship as the arc of my career. I can assure the committee that my broad range of professional experience has well equipped me to be a prepared, thoughtful, and fair associate judge should I be confirmed. I truly love this city and have built my personal and my professional life here. It would be an honor of a lifetime to continue to give back to a city that has given me so very much. I look forward to answering the committee's questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Judge Scott. We now have 3 questions that the committee asks of every nominee, and I'm going to ask each of our nominees to answer briefly with just a yes or no to these questions. Well, we'll start with Mr. Hooks and then work down the panel, and then we'll go online. Judge Scott, we'll have you start on that. First, is there anything that you're aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office which you have been nominated? Mr. Hooks.
No, sir. No,
No.
sir.
No, sir.
No.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Second, do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, sir.
No, Mr. Chairman.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
And lastly, do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I do.
Yes, of course.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Great. Well, thank you. Mr. Hook, first question is for you. FEMA's disaster response efforts have, unfortunately, historically, been plagued by disparities affecting individuals from underserved communities, including individuals from rural and low-income communities, as well as individuals with disabilities. FEMA's 2020 National Advisory Council, which was led by the chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management, found, and I quote, by perpetually assisting larger communities that already have considerable resources. The smaller, less resource-rich, less affluent communities cannot access funding to appropriately prepare for a disaster, leading to inadequate response and recovery and little opportunity for mitigation, end of quote. This committee is working to address this issue right now to ensure that all Americans, no matter where they live, no matter who they are, have access to equitable disaster recovery. So my question for you, Mr. Hooks, first, love to hear your thoughts on this matter, and I want to know yes or no, and any detail you want to provide, that if confirmed, you will commit to working with me on this issue and making sure that FEMA is indeed prioritizing equity in all of its programs and in all of its activities.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. It is extremely important that FEMA serve all communities that are eligible for services. Oftentimes, those communities that can afford it the least and those underserved communities are the ones that suffer the most damage and the consequences from disastrous acts or catastrophes due to nature and other circumstances. Through the last few years, I think that both the federal government and state and localities have really increased the view of looking at all programs through a lens of equity. And if confirmed, I look forward to contributing to that thought process and certainly support the view that all communities should be served, as evidenced by my opening statement. I also have wide experience with this in North Carolina. We have some very thriving, robust communities, such as in Charlotte and the Raleigh area, but we also have some very rural communities as well. And I have certainly seen firsthand the devastation that disasters have taken a toll on those communities. And I bring with me a set of experiences and partnerships that I believe that I can bring a strategic viewpoint to those if confirmed in the position of Deputy Director to FEMA.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Kubayanda, as the Postal Service's regulator, the Postal Regulatory Commission plays a key role in monitoring whether the Postal Service is meeting its on-time delivery goals and holding it accountable to these standards of service, as you know very well. How have you worked to hold the Postal Service accountable for its service performance? And if confirmed for another term, how will you continue to advance transparency and accountability for customers?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. The Postal Regulatory Commission has very well-established processes for holding the Postal Service accountable through the annual compliance process. We oversee the Postal Service's compliance, and I think we've done an excellent job over the years of finding the issues in the postal network and building towards a system of transparency and accountability in the postal system. As we go forward, I think there are some measures, new steps that we can take to improve transparency in the postal system. And there are really three related initiatives that we have going on in that area of transparency. One is an open data initiative, also a data analytics initiatives, and then also data visualization. These are all small-scale initiatives that I think we have a chance to eventually scale up in order to hold the Postal Service more accountable. We are currently implementing compliance with the Open Government Data Act, which includes bringing on a chief data officer, and that will allow us to look at Postal Service performance over time to create some standardization of data and make data available to the public and to stakeholders in machine-readable formats. I think what that can do is allow us to get better informed inputs from stakeholders into our compliance processes and hold the Postal Service accountable. Also, that standardization will help make us more organized in terms of our use of data as well. And so I think that all those can contribute to kind of modernizing our standard compliance efforts.
Ms. Blatchford, as you know, the Payment Integrity Information Act of 2019 passed out of this committee and is a landmark step to ensuring that the federal government reduces improper payments and cuts down on waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal program and the benefits delivery from the federal government. My question for you is, if you are confirmed as a controller What will be your top priorities for accelerating implementation of this act and improving the government's ability to stop improper payments?
Thank you very much for this question. It's an incredibly important topic given the amount of money that's being currently invested in supporting our recovery from this pandemic. I'm very much aware that the Payment Integrity and Information Act was passed and that the implementation of that is underway. If confirmed, would look forward to working with the OFFM and OFB teams to understand where the gaps might be. Again, my guess is because of the size of the investment that we are making collectively, there are real areas to strengthen and to focus. Another thing I would just say, I've seen time and time again in my work, thinking about the Hurricane Sandy Task Force here, moving money quickly into communities in these moments is very important, but it's got to be balanced with a focus on payment integrity. And so the best way to do that, I think in particular, is to focus on prevention, right? The reduction at the beginning of the payment cycle. So that would really be my primary focus. Catching waste, fraud, and abuse later down the chain is important, but I think certainly the best way to do that is to lean into that prevention. And I know there are a number of tools that have been developed by OMB in partnership with the CFO Council and other members of the oversight community to really ensure that the tools are out there to allow agencies to focus as much as possible on prevention of improper payments as a part of that. So look forward to working with you if confirmed on that.
Well, thank you. Ranking Member Portman, you're recognized for your questions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hicks, I want to talk a little about what FEMA's role is in terms of resilience. And I noted that as head of the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, you've had a lot of experience with natural disasters. I mentioned earlier that we've recently passed this legislation that was signed into law this week that provides another $1 billion in funding for BRIC, the Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities Program, basically pre-disaster mitigation to ensure that the taxpayer money is better spent by mitigating some of these potential disasters and helping potential victims avoid the devastation of a hurricane, as you've had in your state, or a tornado or other floods or fires and so on. Have you worked with BRIC? Do you have any experience with them?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Thank you for the question. Through our very experienced emergency management team in North Carolina has pretty successfully navigated their early rollout of the BRIC program. It is my view that with sustainable funding, the BRIC program can be really transformative to the states and consequently to the nation. BRIC program focuses on a very necessary tool that we should be utilizing more, and that is mitigation. I think it's well accepted that the investment of every $1 in mitigation can save us $6 on the back end. And so we have stood up a robust protocol to address the BRIC funding in North Carolina that not only operates at the state level, but really partners with FEMA. Our FIT team that was the first in the nation in North Carolina has been instrumental to our success, and also the build out of the Office of Recovery and Resiliency to work with our local communities to help build a more resilient North Carolina and ultimately a more resilient nation.
Good. Well, again, conceptually, it's a great idea. Relatively new program, as you know, and since 2020, about $1.5 billion has gone out, so it's out there, and I'm glad you're working with it. I hope, should you be confirmed, that you'll work with us to even improve the program further, and probably some lessons from North Carolina would be helpful in that. Would you commit to do that?
Yes, sir, Ranking Member Portman. I certainly commit to work with you and your staff as well as FEMA leadership to address any challenges and to break down any barriers that we have to be successful.
This committee has spent a lot of time on helping to push back against the hateful attacks on religious organizations, other nonprofits. We have this program that we've put together called the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, and we've made preparedness grants there available over the last several years. This year, we actually doubled the funding to $180 million, split even between the urban areas and the states. Are you aware of this program? Have you used it in North Carolina?
Yes, sir. Again, thank you for the question, Ranking Member Portman. As the state administrative agent as well as the Homeland Security advisor, I had sign-off authority on the development of those grants as far as the administration in the state of North Carolina. We were successful in North Carolina at bringing not just the emergency management entity, which the money would flow through from FEMA, but bringing law enforcement and intelligence resources in partnership with those communities so that we could adequately protect faith-based institutions through this process. And again, we have navigated that program pretty successfully in North Carolina.
Well, as you may know, some states have used it more effectively than others. North Carolina's been pretty aggressive in using it. It sounds like my state of Ohio has certainly been successful in figuring out ways to put it to work. So we are glad you support it, and we look forward to working with you on ensuring that the funding we're providing is spent most effectively. With regard to the controller position, Ms. Blatchford, we talked about this in person, so you know where I'm coming from. You have a great deal of expertise and experience in the housing sector, as an example, but you're not up for HUD Secretary. You're up for another job, which, again, is one that is just a hardcore financial management, auditing, accounting job. I mentioned earlier the U.S. Code and what it requires this job to have, and demonstrated ability and practical experience in accounting, financial management, and financial systems, extensive practical experience in financial management in large governmental or business entities. I know you don't have a CPA, but regarding accounting, do you have any practical experience as this calls for, or ability in accounting?
Thank you very much for that question, Ranking Member Portman, and thank you for the conversation yesterday, and glad to continue that conversation today. I don't have a training in accounting, but I would just pull back a bit to say a couple of things about why I do think that I'm qualified for this role. First, as an experienced nonprofit and government leader of large teams, I have, by definition and by necessity, deeply involved myself in financial management. Everything from budget development and execution, financial management of systems, enterprise risk management, auditing, and so just have learned, to the point that you made about practical experience, have learned that I can deeply engage myself in those details as needed. But I also have learned to rely on the expertise of those around me. I think most leaders know that you don't have every technical skill in your toolkit, but often you can rely on your team for the areas that you might not have or that you need to complement. And everything I've heard about the OMB and OFFM teams is that they're extraordinary and would be supportive in that particular area. I would also say I think this is a question about what we need as a country right now, and I think from my perspective, I would bring the strategic vision and the ability to support and work with the technical experts on my team, but really drawing on the expertise and the experience I've had of navigating the inputs from accounting, the inputs from financial management to make the right decisions for the organization that I'm working for. So look forward to, if confirmed, working with you to make sure that we're really addressing all of those concerns.
Well, again, I just have a hard time squaring what the requirements are, and again, having known that position, and it's true that as a leader you rely on others, but the reason the statute was written that way and knowing the job, having the expertise and experience is really important for the leader. I'm not surprising here because I talked about this on the phone, but can you explain the Federal Credit Reform Act and how you see this impacting how various federal credit programs calculate their leverage?
So it's my understanding that the Federal Credit Reform Act is a set of decisions in terms of current and proposed programs. That evaluation is made by the Budget Review Division within OMB that sits outside of OFFM. But I, as we discussed yesterday, I understand where you're coming from on this larger question and had some experience working on this when I was at HUD with the FHA balance sheet. So we look forward, if confirmed, to working with you, the BRD team, and others at OMB to address any concerns you might have about current or future programs as it relates to that Reform Act.
Thank you. My time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Senator Carper, you are now recognized for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. To our witnesses and our nominees who are before us today, warm welcome to the report. I proceed my questions. I just want to take a moment to highlight that we have two D.C. Superior Court nominees before us, Judge Scott and Mr. Tonnage. And before I was fortunate enough to be elected to the United States Senate, I was governor of Delaware for 8 years and spent a fair amount of time selecting people to serve on the Delaware bench, which has, despite the fact we're a little state that has a national, even international reach. But so I get a lot of time and thought to kind of people that I nominated to serve on the bench in Delaware, and who ultimately did. Some still do. I think we have before us today vacancies on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal, Superior Court. They've been vacant for, in one case, 3 years, in another case, more than 5 years. I think that's important. I think that's disgraceful. And the idea that, and it's on us. It's on us in the Senate, and it's on the current administration, and especially the previous administration. I like to say, justice denied is justice delayed, and the idea that we have excellent nominees that have been sent to us for consideration by the District of Columbia, and then we're just sitting on them for years. It's awful. I'm glad that these, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad that these noms are before us today, and hope that they'll get our approval. One of the reasons why I've pushed for several years for DC statehood is because I think if we're not going to allow a state like, or a district like Columbia, District of Columbia, which has more people in several of our states and pays a lot of taxes, have a lot of people serve in the military, and then we get their judicial noms and we just sit on them for years, it's just one more reason why we should consider the legislation that a number of us are proposing, that is DC statehood. Okay, that's a story for another day, but I didn't want to miss it. Secretary Hooks, great to have you with us. My wife's a native of North Carolina, as I said, so we think of you as a distant relative. So she's loves North Carolina, and her roots are still there. But you heard me say the other day, I think it was yesterday when we met, I talked about leadership. And the most important ingredient is success of any organization I've ever been part of, whether it was the Navy or helping run Delaware or serving in the U.S. Senate. It's always leadership. And for an organization to be successful in achieving its mission, that's what's, dedicated, committed, enlightened leadership is the key. Mr. Secretary, as the Secretary of Public Safety in North Carolina, I understand you led nearly 40,000 civilian employees, which is about the size of the civilian workforce in Delaware, including educators. But anyway, you led nearly 40,000 civilian employees and National Guard soldiers and airmen, and were responsible for coordinating emergency management functions statewide. Reflecting on this experience and other leadership roles you have held throughout your distinguished career in public safety and in law enforcement, what are some of the hallmarks of an effective leader in your judgment, particularly when it comes to coordinating emergency preparedness and response efforts across multiple levels of government? Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Carpenter. It was an honor to speak with you yesterday as well. I am a firm believer that leadership can translate across many domains, both the state and to this position as Deputy Administrator, if confirmed. One of the things that I think is a hallmark of an effective leader is making the time and effort to commit the investment in the people that are carrying out that mission. I view both the staff that I had in North Carolina and the potential staff that I may have, if confirmed as FEMA, as part of the critical infrastructure. The most important aspect of any organization are the people that make up that organization. Programs are important, funding is certainly important, but we have to invest in those individuals to ensure that they have a culture where they feel that they can thrive, that they can grow, and that they can be successful. And leaders have to invest in those individuals, often at the demise of their own, self-interest. Because I do believe that shared sacrifice that these people make to secure our nation and preserve our freedoms in North Carolina are extremely important, and they should be recognized for that. And so we want to create a climate of culture of success and promote diversity and inclusion at all ranks, and let them know that they are valued for the contributions that they make to the success of our nation.
Great, thank you for that response, Mr. Secretary. I want to turn now, if I could, to Mr. Kubayanda. Very nice to see you. I call you Mr. Chairman. The Postal Regulatory Commission, as some of us recall, when Congress created the independent U.S. Postal Service in 1970, it also created a 5-member Postal Regulatory Commission to serve as an independent regulator of the Postal Service and to ensure transparency, try to ensure accountability of postal operations. The PRC has oversight authority over postal rate setting and mail delivery performance, and it issues regular reports come to us that focus on the Postal Service activities, its finances, its sustainability. And Mr. Kubayanda, you've now been sort of shepherding and overseeing that mission of the PRC during your time as chairman. And I would just ask, why is it important that the commission have a full slate of Senate-confirmed commissioners?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Carper, for that question. It is critical that we have a full slate of confirmed commissioners. Prior to me joining the commission, we had an empty slot for some time, and with really major rulemakings on the table, including the 10-year review of the rate-making system, which is absolutely critical for the financial foundation of the entire postal system. With the full slate, one of the things we were able to do is quickly turn to that issue and accomplish that. I think it's one of the biggest rulemakings in the 50-year history of the commission. And I would also add that, a full slate of the governors of the Postal Service is also critical. So I think it's absolutely a foundational issue that we have all those slates full and are able to tackle a lot of the critical issues facing the postal system.
All right, thanks very much. My time is about to expire. So I thank you for your service on the commission, for your willingness to continue to serve in this role. Last thing I would say, I start off by mentioning how some of the judicial vacancies in the District of Columbia have existed for 3, 4, 5 years, which is abhorrent. We also are in a situation where the District of Columbia has, I think, a AA+ credit rating, and here we are in the federal government. We have to approve their budget. We have to approve their budget. They should be approving ours. Here we are, just we're in weeks to months into overtime in terms of actually producing our own budget, and still struggling with the debt ceiling issue. And I think that's just one more reason why the idea of giving the District of Columbia the kind of opportunities and responsibilities that they should have in our legislation, my legislation. So one more reason why it should be considered. Thank you. And again, to our nominees, we're grateful that you're here, particularly the judicial nominees. We're very, very impressive credentials. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Carper. Senator Hassan, you're recognized for your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and Senator Portman for holding this hearing, and a special thank you to all of our nominees and to your families for being willing to take on these important positions. Mr. Hooks, I want to start with a question to you. Our new bipartisan infrastructure law includes a provision that I developed to create a new state and local cybersecurity grant program. FEMA will administer the program, drawing on subject matter expertise from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA. Mr. Hooks, if confirmed as Deputy Administrator, what steps will you take to ensure that this grant funding will quickly and effectively get to entities that need it, including in my state of New Hampshire?
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Cybersecurity and our critical infrastructure are extremely important, and as we face challenges both domestically and internationally. If confirmed, I look forward to working specifically within FEMA, but also external to FEMA, with our sister agency at CISA and with the broader department at DHS, along with our local and state partners, to fully implement the authorizations that are carried forward. I look forward to familiarizing myself particularly with the particular nuances of it and understanding full congressional intent. That would be one of the first things that I always look to do in evaluating a program and how we should roll it out, and then seeing how I can execute on the partnerships that are needed to address this. I can't really call it an emerging threat anymore. It's been with us, but it is this persistent threat that's extremely important to the safety of our nation.
Well, I appreciate that very much. You know, even in a small state like New Hampshire, we're seeing cyber attacks at various levels against various entities, and really look forward to working with you to strengthen our resources here and really strengthen our cyber defenses. Ms. Blatchford, the federal government's reliance on outdated and obsolete technology harms our ability to deliver services to the American people, threatens our cybersecurity, and also drives wasteful spending. One way to curb wasteful spending on these old systems is through better cooperation and communication between agency chief information officers and chief financial officers to ensure that there's a coordinated process for determining technology needs and acquisition processes. How can the Office of Federal Financial Management, under your leadership, work to improve cooperation and communication between chief information officers and chief financial officers to save taxpayer dollars?
Thank you, Senator. It's an important question, and I appreciate it. I have seen in my time in government and the nonprofit sector that is really true. Those legacy systems pose enormous risks to effective service delivery, good customer experience, and, of course, to security. So, as you know, OFFM plays a lead role in bringing together the CFOs from different agencies. And so I would imagine leaning into that role to really elevate this issue in importance. It is my understanding as well that interagency role plays an important part of it is busting silos, getting people to communicate, working through these issues. And so based on my experience doing that in the task force and other contexts, would really want to lean in and do that. I also think the partnership across OMB and across the executive branch is going to be critical because, as you said, it's not just the CFOs, it's also the CIOs. And so that synergy and that relationship is something I would work with the CFO Council and other CFO colleagues to address.
That's great. And I would just add that I think one of the things that the CFO community needs to work with with the chief information officers is understanding the length of time it can take to modernize technology this way. And we really have to make sure that our financial systems are working in a way that really can accommodate long-term planning and change. So I look forward to further working with you on that. To Mr. Hooks, I want to go back to a different issue at FEMA because the agency has struggled with serious problems relating to sexual harassment of its employees. A 2020 survey conducted by the RAND Corporation found that approximately 20% of FEMA employees reported experiencing sexual harassment at the agency. If confirmed as deputy, what steps would you take to combat sexual harassment at FEMA?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. As I stated earlier, I believe that in order for any agency or department to be successful, you have to have great investment in the individuals where they can thrive in a culture of excellence so that they feel that they are part of it and they have the opportunities. That translates very cleanly over into addressing any issues of sexual harassment. I am up to the challenge, if confirmed, to meet that issue head on. There is absolutely no place in any part of society for anyone to be made feel less than and moving forward when they're trying to serve their country or carrying out any other job. I have a history of, through my work both in the SBI and then as secretary, of ensuring that we have a workforce that is valued, that women in particular have those opportunities. And as the Secretary of Public Safety, had one of the most incredible workforce dynamics in a field that's generally dominated by male professionals. In that General Counsel and Chief Deputy Secretaries were females, and it set the tone. And so I would lead by example, and I've had a brief discussion with Administrator Criswell. She and I are firmly on the same ground of moving forward to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to thrive and work in a culture of excellence at FEMA, and that sexual harassment will not be tolerated to any degree.
Well, thank you for that commitment. I really appreciate it. Now, I want to turn to Mr. Kubayanda because, sir, in its attempts to become more financially stable, the U.S. Postal Service proposed delaying delivery times for first-class packages, commonly used by pharmacies and banks, for example, to send lightweight products inexpensively. These delays would affect roughly a third of first-class package volume and cause delays on essential items that people in my state of New Hampshire certainly rely on. In September, the Postal Regulatory Commission issued an advisory opinion on this proposed change and found that the Postal Service's proposal to delay service would not substantially affect its overall financial condition, contrary to the stated goals of the proposal. What options or alternatives do you think the Postal Service could instead pursue to improve its financial condition without compromising service?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think that the Commission has issued 2 advisory opinions on attempts to change service standards, and I think both reached that conclusion that the savings on offer were meager compared to what the Postal Service hopes to achieve. I think that the Postal Service has a number of steps they can take, including modernizing. And I think some of these steps to cut costs over time might require some upfront investment. For example, modernization of the vehicle fleet. Yeah. They have a extremely old vehicle fleet with its poor quality, and they've been known to catch on fire, and then also the efficiency is very low. So I think that's something where upfront investment in capital investment can lead to some savings down the line. I think there are, we just approved a new rate-making system for the Postal Service, and I think that it's an opportunity to kind of stabilize postal finances, or at least move the ball forward and improve postal finances. So I think that's something they can capitalize on. And I think long-term, I think there are opportunities for efficiency through information technology, reconsidering how to utilize their extensive network of physical facilities to distribute mail more efficiently. And I think one of the things that we're launching is a data analytics group to look at issues within the postal network, including whether it's aligned in the most efficient manner, and looking at possible bottlenecks and pinch points within that network where the Postal Service might stand to improve. And so I think there are opportunities for incremental improvements over time.
Thank you very much. I realize we've gone over time, Mr. Chair, so I appreciate the extra time. I look forward to working with you on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Scott, you are recognized for your questions.
I want to thank Chairman Peters and Ranking Member Portman for holding this hearing. Congratulate to each of you for your nominations, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Mr. Hooks, thanks for the call we had. It's my understanding that certain states are asking to be reimbursed 100% and retroactively for their COVID-19 costs. Are you aware of this? Do you think states ought to be treated differently with regard to their COVID expenses? And do you think it's appropriate that the federal government take over and pay 100% of costs in disasters?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Scott, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you yesterday. As a state administrative agent coming from a state, it is certainly natural for every state to want to receive additional, compensation or receive 100% cost share. It has to be a balance. FEMA programs are designed to have some cost share element to them, and I understood that as a state representative, but also advocated for my state. And so I certainly understand there has to be a balance. Each catastrophe or disaster is unique. There have been certainly 100% reimbursement on some items that deal with COVID, and I do understand the need. But I do understand the need for FEMA to have consistency in its programs, but at the same time meet disaster survivors where they are. And so if confirmed, I look forward to working with you in your state and any other state that has those concerns about whether or not the 75% match, which is traditional, is being addressed appropriately by FEMA, and that those regulations are being interpreted. Look forward to knowing what headway Administrator Criswell has already made on this matter, because I know it has been of concern to you.
So do you think if states don't have any skin in the game, they're going to watch the money?
I believe, sir, that we all have a role to play, and that states, and in North Carolina, we certainly had skin in the game. And, it's also added with the complexity that a lot of local communities may not have the financial wherewithal as some other communities. And so I think that with honest conversation and with never making promises that you're certainly not able to keep and not authorized by legislation to keep, that we can effectively move forward and address those issues. But we have to encourage states that they have to have some skin in the game.
Over the last year, the disaster relief fund has been redistributed to fund areas not related to disaster emergency management. Do you think it's appropriate that they use FEMA disaster relief funds for non-disaster purposes? Do you think that's ever appropriate?
Thank you for the question, sir. I am not specifically familiar with the reference that you make there. However, I do believe that FEMA and any other organization has an obligation to expend funds as they are authorized and are permitted by law.
So I think we talked about what I watched in the debris pickup, how we had different, if a local agency or a local municipality had a contract that might be for $7 to $8.50 a cubic yard, and if the Corps of Engineers picked it up, it was same company, $72. Do you think that's ever appropriate?
Sir, I think that that each state and the federal government has to encourage the use of advanced contracts, particularly with debris pickup, so that you can have some consistency and a level set what the cost management of that should be. I think that goes a long way into people raising or upticking prices as well. And I think that there should always be internal controls and limitations on what should be charged for disaster recovery.
So we talked a little bit about the National Flood Insurance Program, and what's fascinating to me is that the federal government runs a program that is like my state. We're a 4-to-1 donor state since the program's been implemented. And without doing surveys, they raised the flood insurance cost on many of our citizens in the last 10 years. And they appear to be doing it again. And at the same time, FEMA doesn't appear to be a partner to try to help us get more private flood insurance, which would help Floridians save money. So we're basically paying for flood insurance in other states. Do you think that's appropriate?
Senator, I certainly heard your concern yesterday, and that is certainly on my radar screen. Flood insurance in and of itself is a tremendous tool, a frontline tool to reduce the cost of individual recovery from disasters such as flooding. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you and your staff on any challenges that you see and whether or not the appropriate balance is being struck in the implementation of programs, and whether or not this is an issue of authorization or interpretation on anyone's part.
Do you think it's important that FEMA work with the private sector to allow the private sector to grow so FEMA doesn't have to have as big a program with regard to flood insurance?
Sir, I believe that we all have a role to play, both the private sector as well as government in disaster mitigation and recovery efforts. And so without being specific to the scenario that you laid out, I believe that great communication and great observance to what the congressional intent is for programs be adhered to move us forward.
How are you going to deal with political pressure from whoever? It doesn't matter which party does it, to tell you that, oh, in my state, you have to give us a bigger match than another state. How are you going to deal with political pressure in these? I mean, it's not a little bit of money. We're talking about. We're talking billions and billions of dollars.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. I am not uncaring or lack any empathy for the disaster that anyone faces. However, I took my first oath of office over 30-something years ago, and that oath bound me to follow the law as it has been given, and I will continue to do that in any program that is rolled out with congressional approval. And so I lean to my oath in those difficult times, and I understand the pressures and the advocacy from individuals concerning want to do what's best for their state or their community.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman Peters.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Padilla, you are now recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hooks, appreciated very much our opportunity to meet and chat yesterday. As we discussed in my office, repetitive, catastrophic wildfires have unfortunately become the new normal, not just across California, but throughout the western United States. And so while we're working to address this issue by allocating an unprecedented amount of funding for mitigation work through the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed by the president this last Monday and the soon-to-be completed Build Back Better bill, the speed by which these funds are typically distributed is simply too slow. Mr. Chairman, asked to enter into the record a recent Washington Post article that highlighted the case of Grass Valley, California.
Without objection.
Thank you. You know, in this particular case, highlighted in the article, which I also shared with you, Mr. Hooks, local officials knew that Mount Olive Road and the area around it was at an extreme wildfire risk. And in 2018, they actually applied for a FEMA grant to clear dry brush, thin trees, and mitigate that fire risk. Yet by 2021, they were still awaiting on a decision when the river fire ripped through the Mount Olive Road area of Grass Valley and destroyed 140 structures. Now, according to the same Post article and their research, of the $11 billion that FEMA has allocated for mitigation over the past decade, only $1.5 billion has actually been spent. The research found that counties are made to wait an average of 7 years to complete their FEMA-funded projects, and during those waits, applicants for fire mitigation specifically experience an average of 3 more major wildfires. So they know it's dangerous, they know the threat's coming, and they're impacted while they're forced to wait. And most disappointing of all, the research found that FEMA is about half as likely to fund grants for rural areas, poorer counties, and communities that are made up of predominantly minority residents. They face longer delays in getting grants approved. So in California, these are often exactly where the vast majority of destructive wildfires take place and have devastating impact. So I know that's been a long preamble, but important for the record. Mr. Hooks, my question is this. Obviously, these delays, you would agree, are unacceptable. What steps will you take, if confirmed, to shorten the time it takes for FEMA to reach a decision on grant applications and move the money out the door?
Thank you, Senator Padilla. It was certainly a pleasure to meet with you. From my own experiences, I certainly know that disaster relief never comes fast enough for the people in suffering. And people have been impacted by wildfires in the western U.S., and we have not had that experience to the same degree that you have certainly experienced in California. If confirmed, I look forward to learning about what challenges FEMA has had as far as moving individuals through this program, approving and or denying assistance. And one of the things that I think that I believe we always should do is that as programs grow, that you have to build the capacity and the capability to deliver those programs. And so I look forward to learning from Administrator Criswell and other senior leaders in FEMA as to whether or not, as the money has increased to address these and has been appropriated, have we built the capacity to deliver on those. FEMA has a goal of reducing the complexity of FEMA. And I certainly, as a recipient of grant funding and navigating that process, agree with that forward thinking. I look forward to evaluating along with the administrator and bringing a set of fresh eyes as to whether or not how we've been successful. And also I am very mindful, as you have stated here, is that that communities that are often can afford it the least are most often impacted. And so when we look at programs through a lens of equity, sometimes the length of recovery negatively impacts that equity. And so I look forward to working with you and your staff as well as the FEMA staff to address those issues from that perspective.
Thank you. We certainly look forward to the follow-up. And just on that point of equity that you just mentioned, as I mentioned in the takeaways from the Washington Post article, how do you envision working with traditionally disadvantaged communities to make sure that they're treated more equitably, whether it's in the timeliness of their grant applications, consideration of those grant applications, approvals versus denials, et cetera?
Again, thank you for the question, Senator. I believe that that the use of technical assistance, both at the federal level and encouraging that at the state level, where you have those expertise, both at the federal and state level, to go in those communities. States really have to understand the communities within their jurisdiction. And the federal government, even though we are supporting the disaster from, a little bit further away, have to understand the needs of those communities as well. So again, effectively utilizing those broad partnerships, being really intentional about those community impacts, and I am certainly in tune with that. We've experienced that in North Carolina, where communities, often minority communities, recover less well because of the difficulty in navigating processes to get the appropriate funding.
Thank you. And my last question quickly, Mr. Chairman. My colleague, Senator Scott, asked how you might respond to pressures from higher-ups in the administration, if you will, regardless of political party. I'm glad he pointed that out, to maybe afford larger grants or awards to some states versus others. I would ask the same question slightly differently. How would you respond to any pressures from higher up in the administration, regardless of party, if the agency seemed to be pressured to not award grants that, from a technical standpoint, seem to be justified?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. It is certain. I don't go into the job with that being the expectation. But again,
nobody should.
Yeah. But I do lean toward, just as I said before, lean toward my oath, a deep understanding of the program and what the congressional intent on how to deliver those programs, and also looking at whether or not those programs are meeting the needs of the community. And if there is a gap in whether or not those programs, as authorized, are not meeting the needs of the community, I would be the first to work with Administrator Criswell, as well as with this committee and any other congressional body to make the appropriate adjustments. Pressure is natural because disasters are certainly begin and end locally, and so I understand the need for disaster survivors to recover, and there's a lot of emotion attached to it, but we have to have the appropriate authorities both to award and to appropriately consider those communities that have not previously received awards.
Yeah. Well, California thanks you for that response, and I thank you for that response. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Ossoff, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel. Congratulations on your nominations. My first question, please, is for you, Mr. Hooks. I've been consistently focused on necessary investments and preparations to improve coastal resilience in coastal Georgia, to prepare, for example, communities in and around Savannah, Georgia, for the anticipated storm surge, coastal flooding, and high wind events associated with more intense tropical storms. Mr. Hooks, first, will you commit, please, if confirmed, to traveling to coastal Georgia, sitting down with Mayor Van Johnson and other leaders in and around Savannah, Georgia, as well as the rural communities, for example, across from and around Cumberland Island, to discuss what can be done to improve coordination between local governments and FEMA in preparation for the next storm season?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for the question. Storm surge and other issues that impact our coast are certainly very problematic, both in Georgia as they were in North Carolina. And I do commit to visiting wherever I can and talking with you and community leaders as I can through this process to get a greater understanding of what challenges they may have and to ensure that FEMA is meeting the needs of all communities.
Thank you so much, and would like also your comments on what steps, in your view, FEMA can take to ensure that low-income and minority communities. For example, the Gullah Geechee community in coastal Georgia, who typically bear the brunt of natural disasters and severe storm events, are better prepared and receive equal and fair treatment from national disaster management authorities.
Again, thank you for the question. I do believe that mitigation is the appropriate way forward, and there has been an increased focus on mitigation. And in order for mitigation to occur, there has to be a deep understanding of not just the topography and the weather patterns of a particular area, but the needs of that community. And so I believe that all entities that are involved in disaster response and recovery have a role to play. The community has to come forward with what their challenges are. States have to understand what those challenges are, and that in that partnership, again, has to be relayed and executed with FEMA as a federal partner to get a deep understanding. In North Carolina, we benefited from having a FEMA integration team, which was on the ground with our emergency management that could network and get a deeper understanding of those communities and provide a great way forward to some of those rural communities. But you have to be intentional, and you have to be willing to collaborate at all levels of government and with local communities to positively impact those communities.
Thank you, Mr. Hooks. And when you come down to coastal Georgia, and looking forward to welcoming you, I hope as well that you'll consider meeting with community leaders, for example, Dr. Mildred McLean of Harambe House, and others who are engaged daily in the business of helping prepare their communities for events like major tropical storms. Are you open to having those meetings during your visit, Mr. Hooks, with key civil society leaders and local advocates, church leaders who are helping communities prepare for natural disasters?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. I am certainly amenable to meet with individual leaders for communities. That has been my history, to learn what the challenges are and to meet folks where their need exists.
Thank you. Mr. Kubayanda, my final question for you, please. The level of frustration among Georgians about the delays in postal delivery are extremely high. The frustration is extremely high. So what steps, if confirmed, will you take, please, sir, to accelerate the delivery of mail, ensure a timely delivery of mail and packages by USPS for the people of Georgia?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. The Commission has a really important role to play in the traditional divide between the Postal Service, as they handle the direct operations and we handle oversight. That oversight and compliance responsibility has certainly increased in importance over the last couple of years with the increasing delays in mail service. As I mentioned earlier, we are implementing a number of measures around the use of data to increase our focus on service problems. This includes an open data effort that will allow us to kind of harness all the information that we have on the postal system, get it out in the hands of outside experts and analysts in machine-readable formats, which will, I think, allow us to get better informed inputs about what's going on in the postal system and improve our oversight. And I think will allow us to incrementally nudge the system forward and create some improved results. We're also creating a small data analytics unit with a similar intent to look at issues within the postal network, see if we can get to drill down on the root causes of what's causing the delays. This builds on prior work that the Commission has done to identify pinch points in the network that are slowing down mail. I think this is an effort that we can scale up. There's some interesting developments in the world of data analytics that I think we can take advantage of to become more sophisticated in that. And as I said, get better inputs from the public. Another way that we're hoping to provide increased transparency and accountability is, I think, simplification of data and visualization of data. So we're working on approaches such as dashboards. So your average consumer will be able to go to our website, view what's going on in the postal network in an easily understandable way.
Thank
And I
you,
think
Mr.
that will
Kubayanda.
improve transparency.
And with my remaining time, Mr. Kubayanda, I've heard in particular from constituents in Columbus, Georgia, in Macon, Georgia, and in Albany, Georgia, about mail delays. Will you please commit to working with my office and being available to communicate with local leaders in Columbus, Macon, and Albany to get to the bottom of those delays and accelerate mail delivery and short timely mail delivery for folks in Columbus, Macon, and Albany?
Absolutely, I will commit to that, Senator.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator Hawley, you are now recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Mr. Hooks, I'd like to start with you, if I could, and I wanted to start by raising an issue that I have been talking about for 2 years now in this committee as it relates to FEMA, and that's the need for greater transparency in the FEMA process, particularly after there has been a disaster in the state, when it comes to awarding individual assistance, when it comes to working with local residents. I'm thinking in particular in my state, in the state of Missouri. In 2019, we had historic flooding, as you probably know about in the state. That was true of many Midwestern states. Historic flooding in my state. And unfortunately, we had many residents who were, of course, out of their homes. They were out of their businesses, off their farms in this case. This was in northern and central Missouri. And their experience with FEMA was not a pleasant one. They couldn't figure out what the rules were. They couldn't figure out who to talk to. We had residents who were awarded assistance and then had it retracted from them while they're still out of their homes. They said, here, you do qualify. Here's the assistance. Oh, wait, no, give it back to us. You don't actually qualify. This is totally unacceptable. And at a minimum, FEMA needs to commit to being more transparent, needs to commit to doing a better job on the ground and informing residents in disaster areas what assistance is available, what FEMA can do to help them, who the contacts are, and where they can get information. Then, of course, to make sure that when assistance is needed, it gets to the people who need it, and it's not then withdrawn, the rug isn't pulled out from under them. So, can you commit to me that you will work with me, if you're confirmed, on these transparency issues, on these informational issues for my constituents in the state of Missouri, but for that matter, for everybody who needs it everywhere FEMA serves?
Yes, sir. Senator Hawley, thank you for the question and raising the concern. I certainly can commit, if confirmed, to work with you and any other senator on the challenges that you face. FEMA has as a stated goal to reduce the complexity of FEMA, and I believe that as FEMA does that, and I look forward, if confirmed, to get a greater understanding about what progress they have made to do that, that we can ultimately reduce any situation where we find ourselves having to claw back money, because after somebody has been victimized by a storm and we've met them on their worst day, we don't want to contribute to the angst that they already have.
Thanks for that answer. What steps do you envision taking to make FEMA and the FEMA process, particularly as it relates to assistance, less complex, more transparent, more upfront for those who are desperately in need? Well,
Again, thank you. One of the most overriding things that comes to my mind right now is that, and I'm sure this process is ongoing already with Administrator Criswell there in advance of me, is to review the programs. I think that any program should not just stand in and of itself. There should be a constant review and constant process of improvement to both see whether or not we're meeting the congressional intent and whether or not we are meeting the needs of those individuals that it is designed to serve. And then I would also lean in heavily to look at what the capacity and capability FEMA has to be on the ground to ensure that there's a great understanding as to how these programs are to be rolled out, that connection with the state is extremely important. The state has an extremely important role as far as understanding those local communities, and FEMA has to understand the impact that storms and floods have on those local members in that community, so that we can understand that they may not have documentation readily available, and that we can help them navigate through technical assistance and perhaps FEMA integration teams to help them navigate sometimes what is very complex issues.
Good, very good. Thank you for that. Let me ask you this. Will you commit if you are confirmed, to making sure that you do everything within your power to see that FEMA's resources and its aid is distributed strictly on the basis of need, that it goes to those who need it, that it goes to those who are in danger or who are out of their homes or otherwise qualify for it, and that it's not distributed based on any other factor. Can you commit to that?
Sir, I certainly can commit to ensure that any programs that I am responsible for or responsible for having input to are addressed equitably and meet the congressional intent. So yes, sir.
Good. Well, I raise this issue because the Senate has considered substantial legislation recently in which my friends on the other side of the aisle have tried to impose what they call equity requirements on the distribution of government funds, sometimes on the basis of race or other categories that, frankly, are treated under federal law, where our federal law and our federal Constitution says you cannot target aid on the basis of race. You cannot target aid on the basis of gender. It's supposed to be done on the basis of need. It's supposed to be done on the basis of race-neutral, race-gender terms. I mean, that's been our constitutional law for many years, and I'm frankly worried about a situation in which we see FEMA giving resources on pursuing some sort of social agenda when people in my state, whatever their racial background, wherever they are geographically in my state, whether they're in urban areas or rural areas or the middle of the state or the north of the state, I don't care where, but if they're in need, I want to make sure that FEMA is responsive to them, that FEMA is working with them, and that FEMA is not distracted by some other agenda that doesn't actually have something to do with helping people who are in the midst of a disaster. So can you commit to me that you'll help FEMA keep focused on its mission to help those, particularly in the midst of a disaster, to get the aid that they need and get the response that they need wherever they live, whatever their background is, whatever their personal circumstances may be?
Thank you, Senator. I can commit to work tirelessly to ensure that all FEMA programs reach the intended recipients as specified by law.
Very good. Let me, Mr. Kubayanda, let me turn to you here just briefly in the time that we have remaining. I want to raise an issue that's important to me about Postal Service in rural communities. My state has many, many rural communities, the state of Missouri. I grew up in a rural community. It's important to me that we make sure that the Postal Service continues to fulfill its mission to deliver the mail to those rural communities, to make sure that the lifeline that the Postal Service represents to those rural communities, and by the way, again, that's in my state, that's north, south, east, and west. We've got rural communities all over the state. In every area of the state, and I want to make sure that the Postal Service continues to provide the services that those communities rely on. So let me ask you specifically about what I think is an important piece of legislation that I'm proud to co-sponsor with the chairman, which is the Postal Service Reform Act. I think it's important, and this act would help to make sure that we secure six-day service, protect rural delivery, and ensure that every American, including those in rural communities, have reliable and uninterrupted access to the mail. I wonder if you've had an opportunity to review this legislation and if you support it.
I am familiar with the legislation, and I think it would be a very positive step. It's long overdue, frankly, and I think it would be a step forward. I'm a former resident of both Joplin and St. Louis as a child, and so I'm familiar with a lot of those issues in rural Missouri myself, and I think it's critical that I think this legislation will help advance the ball in terms of addressing those issues.
Good. Thank you very much for that. My time's expired. I might have another question or two for you in this vein, but I appreciate that. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Rosen, you are now recognized for your questions.
Well, thank you, Chair Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and for all the nominees here today, your commitment to serve your country. So I'm going to get right after it and building upon some things that Senator Padilla and I know others have spoken about, wildfires and FEMA assistance, because this year we've seen over 49,000 wildfires burn over 6.5 million acres of land, including several in Nevada, like the Tamarack and Calder fires. FEMA has several programs to assist communities both before and after wildfires, particularly in the Fire Management Assistance Grant, or we call it FMAG. That program has been vital for many communities as they recover. However, I've been hearing from our state constituents that the current criteria for FMAG is too restrictive for rural communities. These areas may be smaller in population, but they rely heavily on the land for their livelihood through mining, through ranching, outdoor recreation. And so without assistance from FEMA, it's much harder for these communities to quickly respond and recover from a wildfire. So Mr. Hooks, if confirmed, will you work with me to reevaluate, possibly change the FMAG formula to make it more accessible for rural communities like mine when we're facing, of course, increasing threats due to wildfires and drought?
Thank you for your question, Senator. If confirmed, I do commit to work with you and your staff about learning the challenges that you particularly face in Nevada and any other state, as far as our programs and whether or not it's a capacity or capability or whether or not there's some additional reauthorization or some work that needs to be done. So I do commit to work with you on the concerns that you've brought forward.
Thank you. I look forward to that because we need to find some, maybe some new ideas to assist our more remote frontier communities as well. And now I'd like to move on to something else that really impacts Nevada, which is our UWASI grants. And so I want to talk to you about our Urban Area Security Initiative, which really protects the city of Las Vegas and its surrounding communities and the critical infrastructure that supports our tourism economy. Recently, FEMA undertook what the agency on its website calls the, and I'm going to quote here, comprehensive, coordinated, and collaborative review, I'm going to end quote, of UWASI risk methodology, including soliciting feedback from stakeholders to develop modifications to the methodology. I'm really pleased to see this because we know that threats continually change, and we need to be adapting along with it. So I'm pleased to see this as Administrator Criswell committed to me when we spoke earlier that FEMA would be meaningfully involved in examining UWASI's methodology. And so we have to be sure that for Nevada, the purpose of UWASI to enhance our preparedness, our capabilities in high threat, high density areas like the city of Las Vegas and other cities like that are really protected. And so we were able to double the UWASI grant when I was in the House of Representatives from $2.5 million to $5 million. The funding's remained steady since, but it's not a lot of money compared to what some of the larger coastal cities receive, and Las Vegas depends on that money to keep residents safe and our over 50 million tourists a year safe. So Mr. Hooks, if you're confirmed, will you ensure that cities like Las Vegas can count on at least level funding for UWASI, either by using the FY 2020 numbers? If we end up using the numbers, excuse me, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. We don't want to use the 2020 numbers. Las Vegas was shut down because of the pandemic. We want to rely on the numbers from 2019 because the pandemic, of course, was an anomaly, and we want to be sure that we have level funding going forward. So our security and safety shouldn't suffer because of COVID-19 closures. And so can you commit to me to work with us, all of us who get UWASI grants, and being sure that the numbers are reflective of 2019 and not what happened in 2020 due to the pandemic?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Thank you for the question. I do have great experience working with the UWASI program as the state administrative agent and the Homeland Security Advisor of North Carolina. We also had a UWASI in Charlotte, North Carolina as well. And so if confirmed, I look forward to seeing how FEMA is evaluating that process. And again, I know Administrator Criswell is very much on top of this as she has arrived in her position as the lead. Ahead of me is coming there as her deputy, if confirmed, during this process. And so I look very much forward to working with you on the challenges that impact the UWASI funding because they are critical to maintaining the safety of our states and ultimately our nation.
I totally agree with you. And we do know, of course, that the threats are ever expanding, diversifying, cyber threats and the like. And so how often do you think the metrics should be reviewed and updated for the UWASI grants as we move forward, looking at these formulas? How often should they be reviewed, updated, and be sure that they're working for every community that they need to protect?
Well, again, thank you for the question, Senator. As far as formal updates, I have, being coming from external from FEMA, I cannot specifically say how often they should be updated, but I believe that as threats emerge and different threats take place, that there should be a constant process of review because we have new threats that are emergent, both domestically and internationally. And we also have additional infrastructure being built every day. And so we have to constantly evaluate that. And FEMA cannot do that alone. FEMA has to do that in conjunction with our sister agency of CISA, has to do it with our sister agency of the Secret Service and many other partners, the FBI and many other intelligence agencies, as well as the military, to get a firm grasp on what the threats are and to address from an all hazards approach. So that process is always ongoing, even if the formal evaluation does not regularly change, because you don't want to change programs, every other month or so, but it has to be a dynamically changing review.
Thank you. I see my time's just about expired, so I'm going to submit a question for the record about extreme heat. As Las Vegas is the fastest warming city in the country, that creates a lot of disaster issues, particularly for our rural, low-income, underserved communities. And I'd like to have a conversation with you about the impacts of extreme heat and how FEMA can help us there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. We got a question for Judge Scott and Mr. Tunaj. The D.C. Superior Court handles, as you know, a very high volume of cases, and vacancies on the bench have created to a considerable backlog of cases. And I think members of the committee would like to hear from each of you that, if confirmed, how will you manage your caseload efficiently while also ensuring that each person that comes before you has a meaningful opportunity to be heard? We can start with Judge Scott. If you could answer that question first, and then Mr. Tunaj answer it, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. As you mentioned, and as others have mentioned, the D.C. Superior Court has quite a few vacancies. Currently, there are approximately 15 vacancies on our court, and I suspect that more will come because of the retirement of my colleagues. Certainly, Chairman, the committee scheduling these hearings and the nominees being confirmed will certainly assist with the backlog, as the court will have more able bodies to deal with the pending cases. Also, although the court has continued to operate during the pandemic, hearings in all divisions of our court were handled virtually and jury trials were suspended. I'm happy to report, Senator, that jury trials in both our civil and criminal divisions are being scheduled. And in my perspective, this will certainly address the current backlog. In terms of what I can do, it begins, quite frankly, in the courtroom. What I can do, and should I have the honor of being confirmed, is to hold attorneys and those, even pro se litigants who come before me, accountable. That means setting deadlines very early in my cases and holding the parties accountable to those deadlines. I know that there's concern about requests for continuances, and I can assure the committee and my colleagues on the court that I would set early deadlines. I would require parties to request continuances well before the hearing or the trial at issue, and be prepared to respond to any questions that I may have regarding the continuances. Lastly, Chairman, it is very important that I myself am prepared. And so I can commit to do what I have been doing as a magistrate judge, and that is to take the bench, having read the case, having read the procedural posture, and being very familiar with the issues before me, so that I am not the reason for delay. And so, Senator, I'm confident that with these items that I mentioned, the court can address the backlog, and I can assist with decreasing the backlog. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Scott. Mr. Tunaj, your answer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by saying I agree with Judge Scott. First, I think the primary obligation, well, the first obligation is for me to be prepared. And I think that also ties into the second part of your question regarding the litigants being fully heard. Part of my preparation, if I am fortunate and granted confirmation as an associate judge, would be to actually fully hear all litigants. And part of fully hearing all litigants is reviewing and reading and analyzing the submission of all parties without favor or bias. I think the one thing that I could do to help any backlog would be to hit the ground running. I think that my training and my experience as a career attorney in the Justice Department, it has brought me exposure in federal district courts throughout the country where I've seen trial judges in quite a few jurisdictions, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. I've seen what works really well. And I think I could bring those experiences and those practice experiences to bear if I were fortunate to be confirmed. And then finally, I do think that because of the national emergency brought on by the COVID virus, the Justice Department, the criminal justice system in general, had to adapt and actually continue its services. And I think there were procedures that were implemented during that emergency that actually have increased efficiency in the courts. And I would like to continue those if I am confirmed as a judge to help ease the backlog by moving cases more quickly and some hearings more expeditiously.
Well, thank you. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank each of our nominees once again for being here before the committee. Congratulate each of you on your nominations and your willingness to take on these very tough jobs. I also want to thank you for your thoughtful answers to questions from members of this committee. All 5 nominees have made financial disclosures and provided the required responses to biographical and pre-hearing questions submitted by this committee. Without objection, this information will be made part of the hearing record, with the exception of the financial data, which is on file and available for public inspection in the committee offices. The hearing record will remain open until 12 p.m. tomorrow, November 19th, for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.